Today I'm talking with Maaz Rana. He built a successful menswear business in Toronto and then co founded Knockri, a successful AI B2B business in Canada. He also scaled to 8-figure ARR, landed clients like IBM, and led go to market from zero. He has now joined Mars Discovery District to build and run a new go to market accelerator for Canadian founders. Maz, happy to have you here and happy to hear the story behind your business. So before Knockri, you had a menswear business, specifically men's suits, and the business was doing really well. Tell us about how was it? What were the main challenges? Who were the clients? What was the revenue, if it's not a secret?
Yeah, sure. So revenue, we were approaching towards 500,000 in ARR. It was a good business. It was a fun business. Primarily, our customers were in the financial district, and we were servicing people who worked in corporate. And yeah, we're in our early 20s at the time, very scrappy, very B2C focused, of course, and networking and building our Rolodex and portfolio of customers through there. And as we initially started without any office, without anything, and we were going and actually doing appointments ad hoc. And then eventually, as we gained success, we were able to get our own office, and we landed in the financial district since that's where our main customer base was. And yeah, we started scaling from there. We got ranked top 10 in Toronto through BlogTO, etc.
Wow.
Yeah, so and then we kind of continued to transition the business in terms of scale. And eventually I ended up leaving that business, but I'm sure that we'll talk about that.
So you said that you had a 500,000 ARR business when you were still in your 20s, which is considered rather early. And you also said that you would go to the downtown of Toronto to basically get your clients for the menswear business. Can you tell us how did you actually land your first client being in your 20s, having no office, I assume having no previous background to like flex and say I'm
Right.
actually a very legit trustworthy person. So how
Yeah.
did you get those first clients to tell you, "Oh, please like sew some clothes for me"?
Yeah. So first, it started with friends and family, our initial customers, and it also allowed for us to test out the process and our entire infrastructure. And then as we started to transition through that, the advantage that we had was that we could wear our product, right? So we got ourselves some really nice three-piece suits, and then we went to various networking and happy hour events in the
Wearing your
finance,
suits, I assume.
wearing our suits in the financial district. And typically people, when you're talking to them, they ask you, "Hey, what you do?" So it was a very easy conversation, right? And then they saw the product themselves firsthand, and then wanted to start getting suits from there, right?
I have an not the most comfortable question for you. Was the
Yeah,
business actually profitable? Because it's very operations heavy. It's not like a
yeah,
typical startup where you don't need an office. You don't need
yeah,
to actually buy some materials and clothes and
yeah.
import it from different countries.
Absolutely, that's a great question. So, um, barely profitable, and so we were quite lean in terms of how we were operating, and even buying material. We didn't buy material up front, and like in volume, as an example, it was based off on need, and then as we continue to scale, we knew which materials were more popular over others, so we had those secured. And also, where we saw the window of opportunity as well was that at that time we had a lot of people in our network who were getting their first professional career jobs in the first, in the big four consulting firms, as an example. And they wanted to dress well and they wanted to wear quality clothes, but they didn't have the disposable income than their more tenured and seniored colleagues. So that's where we found the gap where we could provide quality and very well fitting clothes, or rather suits, and menswear articles of clothing at a more, let's say, economical price. And so through virtue of that, obviously our margins weren't as high, even though our profit, I mean, our operating was expenses were fairly lean. There was an opportunity to continue scaling that as well, but when people say, "Oh, we're approaching 500,000," that sounds great, but I think your question is gets more to the crux of it in terms of actual revenue was, we were definitely making profit, but it wasn't anything too crazy.
So you're
Yeah.
saying the business is actually not the best one in terms of profitability, but you're saying that it also actually did break the even.
Yeah, we definitely did break even, which I mean, within during that time, within the life of the business, was actually fairly good when it comes to traditional businesses in of themselves. And there was also potential to scale that model out, but of course, it would require more upfront investment in terms of our cost of operations and securing more materials, etc. Um, One of the things was that we did, we were three founders, and some of us wanted to go more into the e-commerce model, where there's more potential for scale, more potential for profits, and then some of us wanted to stick to a more like brick and mortar type of model. So there was a little bit of divergence in terms of that, which partly led to transition, moving away from the business itself. But yes, to answer your question, actually, you framed it that it might not be the best business model, but for where it was at that time, it was a pretty decent business model. And then, but in order for us to scale and become more successful, we would have to fine tune it for sure.
And you tapped into my next question perfectly because I want to ask, why did you decide to leave your menswear business, which, like you're saying, it was profitable, maybe not some crazy numbers that you would have expected? And why did you decide to go from men's suits business to an AI business before AI was even a thing?
Yeah.
And I'll add here for whoever is watching us that Maz is also a university dropout. So
It's out there now. No, it's yeah, proudly so.
so you were
Um,
very bullish on whatever opportunity you saw. You dropped out of the university, then you built the menswear business,
right.
then you made a tough decision to leave it and split with your co-founders, and you decided to go into an absolutely different area which was so new to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we often have the stories of dropping out of university being like a glamorous story, etc. Which in some cases for some people it was. For me, I didn't intentionally drop out of university. It was more so I wanted to take a break and see what I truly wanted to do. And it turned out that I started that menswear business, and from there I started my next business, and I just never returned back. But when I had stopped going to university, it was more so to figure myself out, and I had the luxury to be able to do that. At the same time, it wasn't. I didn't consciously make the decision and be like, okay, I'm dropping out of university. It's just I never went back. That being said, in terms of the transition from the previous menswear business to the tech business, it was a combination of reasons. I think one of two chief of which were the actual problems and the pains that we were experiencing in the menswear business. As we were scaling, we were hiring, and we found that many times people looked great on paper and over the phone, but when they came in for an interview, it wasn't the best match, or it wasn't the best interview. And at that time as well, one of my partners, co-founders at that business, he decided to go back to the private sector. And as he was trying to interview, he has a very ethnic sounding name, and he wasn't getting any callbacks. Suggested for him to anglicize his name. He ended up doing that and got interviews, right? So we were finding these problems that were in the talent acquisition process. And him and I, we always wanted to do something in tech. We were always interested. In fact, we were infusing tech into our menswear business and experimenting with that as well. But we saw that opportunity and we said, hey, you know what? This is probably something that's still unaddressed and untapped. And we started talking to people in the industry if they were experiencing the same or similar pain points. And that turned out to be a prevalent problem. So we decided, hey, let's try to solve this. And as we thought about how we would solve it, many of the pain points came through our own biases, right? Human biases, personal biases, which can sometimes work to our benefit and sometimes it can't, right? And so we started thinking about artificial intelligence and how that could potentially help with solving that problem. And we, connected with a technical founder from there, and then we started the business.
That's awesome. And Um, the next question that I'm very curious about is that Knockri has one of the clients being IBM.
Right,
And I also know from you that IBM was one of your very first clients.
right.
So, how the hell did you land IBM
Yeah,
as one of your first clients,
right.
with Knockri being your very first startup?
Yeah, it's a interesting story and journey rather, because typically when it comes to tech startups, especially in SaaS, B2B SaaS, you want to start with maybe mid-market and then scale into enterprise. Whereas we kind of started, and one of our first and biggest customers was a large enterprise customer. So it was a different kind of journey than the typical journey that you find in B2B. Um, but how we ended up landing IBM was that I remember at the time there was a conference that IBM was holding in Toronto, and it was very expensive in terms of the tickets,
How
and
expensive?
uh, it's expensive enough for us not to be able to afford it, right? And we were very lean, we were bootstrapping, you know, and what we did have the benefit of having was, again, really nice suits. So we decided, hey, let's get into the conference, because our ICP was CHRO's VP of Talent Acquisitions. So the CHRO of IBM Global was giving a keynote at that event, and it was in Toronto, and we had to seize the opportunity. So we put on our best three-piece suits and we just walked in there like we belonged. And you know, despite there being heavy security, nobody stopped us. And the thing is that when you're building a startup, at all times, regardless of your stage, but especially when you're early stage, you have to be ready to pitch at any time. And so we sat at the keynote, and the CHRO was talking about what IBM's plan is and their product roadmap, etc. And we immediately could identify where within their product roadmap we would be able to actually help them. So as soon as she got off stage, we kind of just ran towards her and we said, hey, you know, you were mentioning this. We've already built this out. So instead of you potentially building it out, you can already use it. And we secured that conversation and we just pulled her aside and we opened up a laptop and ran through a quick 5-10 minute pitch to her, and she said, okay, you know, let's hop on a call. And that's where our journey with IBM started. And it was a lot long to say, as you know, B2B SaaS sales cycles are much longer, and there's many hurdles that we had to go across in order to close IBM fully, but that's how it started. Yeah.
Thank you for telling me and everybody who is listening to us the real story of how you decided to chase the opportunity. So the answer is, for any B2B founder who is just starting out, is basically to put their nicest suit on, fight the security, and get to the conference where the best prospects are
Right.
speaking on the stage.
Yeah. Or you know, if you don't have a suit, maybe your best T-shirt, but you know, just walk like you belong. You know, I think that's the most important part.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And continuing the conversation of how you got those sales early on, can you tell us some of the most unhinged stories and actions,
Right.
and anything that you have done to land some really good prospects
Right.
to answer your emails, answer your calls? Tell us some
Right.
interesting stories, maybe something memorable, something unconventional that you had to
Right.
do.
I mean, there's so many. There's a lot of sneaking into conferences, to be very honest. There's a lot of various things. But what I'd say is, like, especially where you were going to say something.
I was about to say that all the conferences will double their security numbers after they listen to our interview.
Yeah. Um, but you know, I could talk about so many things. Even the way go to market is today, it's changed a lot from where it was at that time. You know, when it comes, it's a lot more. I mean, it's always been signal based, but I think it's even more so signal based now, given all the noise that's out there for people that you're selling to, right? But one thing that hasn't changed, and I think is much more important now, even more so, that founders need to get very comfortable with, is in person. And you know, we talk a lot about building trust, and you can build trust in various ways. But one of the best and most potent ways of building trust is meeting the people that you're selling to in person multiple times. And that over a period of time will allow for you to build that trust with them so that they can take you through the process of the buyer's journey. Because especially when you're starting off early, that is one of the key differentiators that is going to serve you very well. And you can put, hey, we have this logo, we have that logo. Many startups, especially early stage, there's a lot of cap, where you might not have, you're loosely associated to some company. You might show them as your customer or something like that, right? And I think a lot of ventures or buyers now are privy to that as well. So one of the biggest things is just FaceTime, trying to get FaceTime with people over and over again so they can help build trust. And when you're in your early stages of your product as well, trust can start getting built by heavy product validation, right? So the one thing that is imperative that I've found, not only for myself, but a lot of other founders in my network, people who I've grown to have relationships with successful businesses and startups and scale ups, is look, you have to do rigorous customer validation. And as you're building your product through the feedback of who your projected ICP might be, you're building something that they would potentially buy, right? So as you're getting their feedback and you're informing your product based on the feedback that they are providing to you, a successful validated product would yield in them converting into an actual customer once they've provided the feedback, because they've co-built this with you, right?
They have skin in the game.
They have skin in the game, and it's based on the specific problem that they're experiencing. So by a certain point, if they're not ready to actually buy, that means you've done something wrong, right?
You said one interesting thing that you said was you need to meet your potential buyers multiple times in person.
Yeah.
Can you give us some advice here? Because the way it usually works, and with myself being an ex founder too, you usually get a person to answer you. They say, we might be interested in the future, or you meet them at a conference, or you go literally into their offices and demand a meeting with them through security or concierge. How do you actually secure those multiple touch points with the person who is your perfect potential buyer? Do you just keep messaging them? How do you make sure they don't ask you to stop doing that um,
Yeah, yeah.
in a polite way or a
Right.
less polite way?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean by saying you need multiple touch
Yeah.
points in person?
Yeah, you just stalk them like crazy. No. So this especially applies for B2B, right? So I'd say securing multiple touch points, like we're discussing, is very important. Now, I'll actually use an example, something that I experienced on the other end. So on LinkedIn, somebody had reached out to me. Like I get inbound, I get people reaching out to me, pit slapping me all the time, right? So there was somebody who reached out to me, and they're already part of a successful business, but they're building a new product offering, and this person was in charge or helping lead building that out. So their first outreach message was actually great. It was amazing. It started off with, "Hey, we're building this out, and I would love. We're speaking to folks within the industry that might be experiencing these problems. Love to get some of your feedback, etc. And if it turns out that this is something that you're interested in as well, we can talk about that, right? So founders have been using this for a very long time, of being like, hey, I'd love for your feedback, but there might be some intentions of like selling as well. But nonetheless, the way that you frame it really matters. And if you frame it well, the person will want to gravitate, because people always want to give advice, right? So that started off very well. And then I responded. And long story short, I had said that, look, in terms of buying right now, it's not like the right time, but I'm happy to provide some feedback, right? And the person did not follow through with that. And that's the thing. You see, sometimes people are in the buyer journey. They might not be close to the end goal of where you want to be, um, but that doesn't mean that you do not help with kind of taking them through that journey, right? Um, So where that person personally, from my perspective, made a mistake was that they really just made it obvious that they were just trying to sell me something, and they weren't looking for genuine feedback, right? Where they could have benefited from, because I was in the industry that they were trying to sell to, right? So not only could I provide a good feedback, but if I thought that people within my network would have been a good fit for that solution, I would have recommended them as well, right? So it's more so about trying to build relationships than actually trying to sell your product, especially in B2B, right? You want to have a conversation with the person, learn what their day to day is like, allow for them to share things with you that, that are going on in their world, and have a much more consultative approach, right? And much more leading with genuine curiosity rather than trying to sell a product. And I think when you meet people and you have those kind of conversations and you lead with those types of intentions, people can pick it up. And that's what allows for you to continuously see them or have multiple touch points, if that helps answer your question.
Absolutely. The
Yeah.
takeaway I have from your story is for all B2B founders, instead of trying to chase potential clients and being fully transactional, oh, if you don't want to buy my product, I withdraw myself and I'm not interested anymore. You can ask so many good questions like, can you introduce me to somebody who might be interested? Do you have any contacts in the industry
Right.
that I'm interested in? And people will actually be open, just like yourself, like
Yeah.
you said.
I will interject a little bit over there and say that another common thing that people have, problems that founders have, is that they have multiple asks to their prospect. You should not be having multiple asks, especially when you don't know the person. So when a person is replying to you, they're replying out of goodwill, right? So you should keep it focused. You should just have one ask from that person and stick to that, because you haven't built a relationship or rapport. This person does not owe you anything, right? So have one ask, meet with them, have a rapport, build a relationship, right? And as that continues to mature, then you can have another ask if it calls for it, right? But do not ask for multiple things from a person. Just ask for one thing. Try to make it personal. Try to make it so that the person feels like you're genuinely curious and want to connect with them, and then take it from there.
That is a really good point. So, one, lead with one question, and two, be respectful.
Yeah.
Awesome. And the last question about your business journey is going to be the one related to where you are now. So, after being a successful founder for, I believe, more than 10 years, you chose to join venture capital space in Toronto, namely Mars Discovery District. I think many people who will watch us know exactly what it is. Why did you choose to go into the VC space? There are so many contradicting opinions about VC in Canada
Right.
sucks. Go to the US, go to
Right.
SF. If you're not in SF, what are you even doing? So, what are your thoughts on it? You could have chosen so many paths. You could have become a founder again. You could have built a boring business. You could have become an exec at another startup, at another company. But you chose to join venture capital in Canada.
Right.
Why? What is good about it? Why do you want to be a part of it?
Right. Great question. I think so. For one, I'm more on the venture growth side of that, on that side of things, but it's to put it very simply, that's where I get a lot of joy from, and I decided to make that transition because I really enjoy working with founders, helping them solve their problems, and there's a myriad of different types of problems, especially when it comes to go to market, and I had the opportunity of building something new at Mars as well, which really closely aligns with my founder DNA and building things from scratch and then scaling them, right? So I think that opportunity really enticed me, and then um, the the potential of being able to impact founders and bringing in some of the best and the brightest builders, Canadian builders, and helping with supporting that program is an accelerator is something that like very much excites me, and I think the product of that is having a deep impact in the Canadian tech ecosystem and potentially even taking that further on an international scale, right? So just the idea of that is something that really energizes me and it gives me joy. So it was a no-brainer for me. Yeah.
This energy is so much needed for Canada. And one more question about VC. So, during your times at Knockri, you also raised a $3 million round from the US VCs. So, do you think it's
It was
worth
more
it?
than that, but it
It
wasn't
was
as
more
much.
than $3 million.
Yeah.
So, you raised a round from the US VCs with Knockri. Was it worth it? Do you regret raising?
Right.
And do you recommend everybody to raise who is working in the B2B space?
Right. Would I say that I regret it? No, because there was a lot of things that I learned through it, and I think I gained a lot of amazing experience through the process and contacts. Would I do it differently in the future if I was to take that route? Absolutely. Is it for everyone? Does every venture need to do it? No, and I think it's absolutely glamorized, and it's an empty metric many times. Revenue is king, and I think ultimately, and of course now, especially in the market that we're in today, if you even for a seed round or a pre-seed round, you need to have revenue as a company in order to successfully close that round. But nonetheless, many businesses don't actually need it. Many founders don't actually need it, and having pure autonomy from that perspective is also important for some businesses specifically. We have this as a founder. What I would say is that many founders end up falling into dumb money, right? Which essentially is they're just trying to raise from anyone and everyone. And I think this is not something new or revolutionary that I'm sharing. For many years, people have clamored and said, try to raise from investors that are specialists in your domain, or they know what types of problems, they're familiar with the types of problems that you're solving, etc. So they're providing much more value than just money, right? Because uh, when you're a founder and you have limited runway, it's very enticing for you to just be like, hey, I just need the money. And in order for us to survive and in order for us to scale, I'd say start building your relationships with VCs way before you needing to actually close that round rather. So you're not in a position where you have to close quote unquote dumb money. And you have to just leverage your VCs, right? Closely tie yourself to VCs that can actually help you in either go to market or in product or in operations, right? Because some VCs give great advice, some don't, and I've seen many startups where um, ultimately as a founder the responsibility falls onto yourself, but they've also gotten very poor advice from VCs and their lead VCs that have led to difficulty or even the demise of their startups, right? So you have to be very careful and you have to be very particular about how you approach it, because that conventional thing where it's like, okay, I'm just going to raise a round and it's just about the money. It's not just about the money, even though at that moment it really feels like it, especially with all the problems and the anxiety you might have as a founder in terms of keeping your business alive. But I think in this aspect, the sooner you start, the more intentional you are, the better it's going to be for you, your venture, and your potential growth in the future.
It sounds to me like whatever business you're building, whether it's B2B or B2C, it's very important to build those relationships and in practice just talk to people, get them on your side, always be respectful, and do not just lead with trying to sell to everybody. While it's
Right.
still a big piece of success for
Yeah,
sure.
100%. And what you have to recognize and what you have to know as a founder is that there's two very important things, especially in the earlier stages. Obviously, revenue when you're raising a round, but VCs are also investing and taking their gamble on you as a founder. That's a big driving consideration. So you can start that very early on, even before you've gotten the traction and the revenue in order for you to close your round, right? So the VCs, you're building that relationship. They're seeing how you are as a founder. They're learning about you. So it becomes even easier for you to close at a certain point in time when you're ready to do that. So VCs, they really invest in the person at an early stage rather than even the general idea sometimes, because even when you're doing early validation or you have early traction, your business can pivot. but they need to know that you're the person who's going to be able to execute that.
That is very true. And I think a big part of it is also that VCs invest partially in a person and only, like you said, partially in their business because the business model might change several times. And this is the perfect time to ask you some rapid fire questions. The first question would be, what is your strongest trade and what is the trade that gets you in trouble? Be honest.
That's a good question.
The
Maybe the
answer
inter yeah.
the answer I am perfect is not cannot be taken.
No, that's definitely not it. It's maybe they're a little bit connected actually. So I'd say one of my, you said skills, right?
What is your personal trait?
Personal trait. Yeah. Okay. So I think one of my personal traits is that I listen to listen. I don't listen to respond. And I think many times people say this is very important in personal relationships, but it's very important as a founder and in a startup as well, where when you're having conversations, not only with potential customers, not only during the validation phase, VCs, anyone, when you're having a conversation, you try to really listen to what the person is saying and digest it and then ask follow-up questions and have genuine curiosity rather than listening to respond to the person with your opinion. Because I think also as founders, many times people have the propensity to communicate or share that they're right or their idea is right or their opinion is right and you're wrong, or perhaps it's something else altogether, right? So I think actually listening to a person, asking follow-up questions why that person is holds that position, why they don't, is more important than you having to reveal or share that you think that you're right or your opinion is more accurate. Because as a founder, there's so many things. Even if you share with somebody casually that, oh, I'm a founder of this and this, people will just give you, advice unmitigatedly, right? You don't always have to respond. You can listen to them and you can either change the topic, or if it's something that's got your curiosity, you can ask follow-up questions. That's just like more on a personal level, but I think just when it comes to building the business and even speaking to customers and VCs, that very much applies as well. And I think that's helped me throughout the entirety of my career as a founder and just being in the tech ecosystem.
And which trait gets you in trouble?
I think it's a little bit interconnected because maybe early days I'm speaking from experience. This is a learned lesson, right? So at times, people often share their opinions. I thought they were wrong, and I just used to tell them that I think that they were wrong, and having that kind of engagement. And sometimes it got me into trouble, right? But at the same time, I came to realize as well that it takes so much cognitive load. It's like, why even engage in certain things like that? And at the same time, it's what you what I found worked the best for me is that, again, a lot of people are going to give you advice and you always listen to them because maybe 20, 30 things that the person says you do not agree with, but they might be that small little nugget, that could really help you, where you're like, you know what, I should probably try that out to see whether it works or not. And in order for you to get to that, it's through conversations and asking questions rather than you trying to communicate that, hey, I think you're wrong and I think I'm right.
That is a great answer. And another rapid fire question is, what is success to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that changes, and it doesn't. Um, it can manifest itself in various different ways for me, but I think the one through line or the one point of consistency is trying to. Maybe this might sound generic, but just trying to impact people in a positive way. I think that's what a
That's a
successful
very
life is.
cheesy answer.
It might be.
The last question, what is something that people often get wrong about you?
Um, Maybe I'll leave this to your viewers. Maybe they had like an impression of me at the beginning of the podcast, right? Um,
So that is an open question. Tell us what is wrong about about Maaz Rana.
yeah, yeah. I have a thick skin, so by all means, I think it'll be a fun exercise.
Absolutely. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for telling us all the juicy stories and all the practical advice that came from your real experience of building a successful eight-figure ARR business in HR tech and AI. And I'm really happy to have you here today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.